Thank you, Amani. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience of our program in the West Bank and Gaza, and the reason why I'm here today is in this article there are two case studies taken from Gaza on page 15 and page 18. So I'll talk a little bit about our program, a little bit about these case studies, and then any questions you want to pose at the end, there'll be time for that as well. The first thing I want to say is both of these, both the article and the manual have dignity in their title, and I think that is the key issue in the approach that Cheryl and Kate have proposed through the manual, and it's the key issue that we're looking at in Gaza and in the West Bank. When we chose to respond to the situation in Gaza following Operation Cast Lead in 2008-2009. We looked at the situation and we looked at the work that was happening there, and there, like most sort of quick onset emergencies, there's this rush of humanitarian assistance, rush of humanitarian agencies, and the organisations, the local Indigenous organisations, the community organisations, can quite often be forgotten in the process as the UN, the humanitarian sort of fleet flies into town and starts operating, and that's certainly what happened in Gaza. And the video that I'll show in a minute will demonstrate the feelings and the sort of emotions that sort of arose through the impact of the humanitarian community, which they saw as an impact in terms of and dignity terms. You know, they appreciated the fact that they were there, they appreciated the fact that they all came and they responded quite quickly, but they saw it as a process of disempowerment. They lost dignity through that process. So I think one of the key things that we're looking at in our program is that protection happens. It's a truism. When you consider, you know, if you look at the metaphor of a cat, you push a cat into the corner and then you start spraying it with water, it will act to protect itself. And if it gets to an extreme situation like that, it will be a violent protective mechanism. You know, they'll put their claws out and start attacking. Same thing happens in communities, and so the manual really tries to identify what are those non-violent protective mechanisms that enhance the community, that bring love back to the community and harmony back to the community, and aim to maintain and pursue that level rather than letting things go to the point where they'll get their claws out, so to speak. So yeah, the key thing is looking at the community as victims, as not as victims, but as active agents in this process. Sorry, I'm just reading what's on the PowerPoint. So okay, so look, when Operation Cast Lead happened, we put together two programs, and I just want to talk quickly about the two programs because one was highly successful and one was moderately successful, or moderately unsuccessful, however you want to look at it. The successful program was with a partner who we'd been working with for over 5-6 years, and we had a strong relationship with this partner, and they had strong linkages throughout the community in Gaza. The program was impressive because the organisation who we partnered, Asala, they had an ongoing microfinance program in Gaza, and they had what we asked them to do was to identify who of their clients, they work exclusively with women, and the microfinance is for income generation projects. It's a women's empowerment microfinance organisation. We asked them to identify who of their clients had been negatively impacted by the crisis. And they came back to us with a list of over 400 women who had had their businesses damaged or completely destroyed through the war. And initially, the program we wanted to implement was basically a cash grants program where we could give them cash to get their businesses back off the ground. Asala, in the beginning, were completely opposed to this approach because they saw it as antithetical to a microfinance approach, which aims to develop responsibility and mutual responsibility in a program. They didn't want to do the cash grants program. Because we had a strong relationship with them, there was a dialogue that took place over maybe 3 to 4 weeks where we were arguing the merits of a cash grants program. They were arguing that it's going to have a negative impact. In the end, they changed their mind, and they changed their mind after doing discussions and interviews with their clients in Gaza. We did this cash grants program, and what we found 6 months later is that 90% of the women who we gave cash grants to have started to repay their loans to Asala. They've started to, their businesses are effective again, and they've not moved towards an aid dependency type approach. The cash grants haven't had the negative impacts that Asala was afraid of. So it's been a really interesting and effective humanitarian response that's aiming at rehabilitating and rebuilding communities and small-scale economies. The other program we did was with community-based organisations, and it's been, why I say moderately successful, there were two components to this community-level program. One was capacity building within the community-based organisations themselves. The other was a more of your direct assistance type program with these community-based organisations. Now, the community-based organisations were set up. They had missions related to child support, family health, psychosocial support, and other type activities. When we went to them and said, "What would you like to do?" they sort of came back to us with a stock standard list of what you would term humanitarian activities in the Gaza context around relief and so forth. They didn't have any prior experience doing these kinds of activities, and we've had moderate success in the impacts from these humanitarian activities that they did. That's why I say moderately successful. Now, I'm not going to get... We can talk about it after why they weren't so successful, but the successful part of this program was, in actual fact, the relationships we developed with these community-based organisations, because we didn't give the money to them to implement these projects and then sort of have a hands-off approach to them. We worked very, very closely with them on their organisational development, their professional capacity to implement these programs, and their professional capacity in things like undertaking protection assessments and taking a protection approach to their programs. This has been the real impact. We now have a very strong relationship with these community-based organisations, despite some of the failures we see in the programs that they've implemented. And because we have this relationship, because we have this commitment, and because we have this trust between them, they responded to us in an honest and transparent way about the way we were programming and about the way the humanitarian community was programming. So the video that I'm about to, or that we'll play now, illustrates some of the views that they shared with us, which I think you'll find quite interesting because they are overwhelmingly negative towards the humanitarian community. It's something you don't often hear from your partners. This is, sorry, I should also give credit to the organisation that did this video. ActionAid didn't do it ourselves. We worked with one of our partners called Sharek Youth Forum, which is a very, very professional and effective national organisation in the occupied Palestinian territories.
المثل العربي القائل: مت كريما ولا تمت ذليلا. في البداية خسرنا أرواحنا خلال فترة الحرب، ومن ثم خسرنا كرامتنا بالطريقة التي تتعامل معنا بها بعض الجهات الدولية. يبدو وكأن لهذه الجهات الإنسانية الدولية أجندتها الخاصة، فبعضهم لم يبد أي اهتمام لقدراتنا الخاصة كمؤسسات أهلية محلية في التعامل مع الأزمات. بعد الحرب قلت الثقة بالمنظمات الدولية غير الحكومية، خصوصا تلك التي بدأت بتنفيذ البرامج والمشاريع بشكل مباشر دون الرجوع إلى مؤسسات المجتمع المحلي لتحديد احتياجاتها أو بناء القدرات والموارد الخاصة بها والعمل من خلالها. ليس باستطاعة المجتمع الدولي والمساعدات الدولية حل هذه المشكلة إلا إذا بدأنا نحن كمجتمع فلسطيني بحل مشاكلنا بأنفسنا، ويجب علينا التركيز على قدراتنا الخاصة ومسؤولياتنا. نحن نقدر الجهود المبذولة من قبل المجتمع الدولي الإنساني لإغاثة أهالي قطاع غزة. نحن نعتقد أن تقديم الخدمات والمساعدات الإنسانية يجب أن يكون وفق إطار زمني محدد، وألا تستمر لفترة طويلة، بل العمل على إعادة بناء وتأهيل حياة الناس بشكل تنموي تدريجيا. جل ما نحتاجه هو تعزيز وبناء قدرات العنصر الفلسطيني لإعادة إعمار بلاده، لا أن يعتمد على الخدمات الإغاثية التي تلغي البعد التنموي. نحن بحاجة إلى تكثيف الضغط الدولي على إسرائيل لرفع الحصار عن غزة. نحن بحاجة إلى تعزيز الشراكة ما بين مؤسسات المجتمع المدني والمؤسسات الأهلية وبين المجتمع الدولي من أجل تقديم الخدمات المختلفة على أساس تكاملي وليس تنافسي. قبل الحرب كان المستفيد يبحث عن نشاطات لبناء وتطوير قدراته، أما الآن فهو يبحث عن المساعدات الإنسانية.
So you can see the response of the local communities and the local organisations in Gaza is sort of illustrated quite clearly through that film. So look, following the film, we next slide. Next slide. So following the film, we did some critical self-analysis of our own organisation, and we looked at how we can start to reverse this trend. And there are a lot of limitations on what you can do in a crisis that is defined by the humanitarian circumstances, the funding cycles, the ways of working, the operations, the communities. Everybody's used to this sort of humanitarian way of operating, and so what we were confronted with was a situation where they weren't used to a international NGO going to a local community-based organisation and saying, okay, well, you tell us what you want to do. Because there's one thing about that film is there's a lot of criticism of the international community, but we've also had a lot of difficulty working with community-based organisations and trying to elicit their program ideas and their initiatives. They do exist and they're there, but their willingness to share them with us and their willingness to share them with other local community-based organisations is quite low, because it's a competitive humanitarian environment. The competition for funds, the competition for donors, and so it's that sort of environment. And so this is where we chose this approach of identifying organisations that we were impressed with. And what I mean by that is organisations that were doing activities that were independent, creative, and that they would be doing with or without the support of the international community. One organisation called FECRA, I was impressed with. They do animation workshops with communities, with children, sorry. And these animation workshops involve the creation of a short film, and the process they go through is it takes 6 weeks. They work with the children to develop a story idea, then they work with the children to create the drawings and the pictures, very low technology, normally out of cardboard, and then they use blue tack to stick them to a board, and then they move the pictures around to create the animation film. And then the children do a voiceover, the sound effects for the film, and then at the end of it, they've got a 5-minute film that the children created of their own making. It was facilitated by FECRA. Now these films are amazing because they the films that were produced after the Gaza war were amazing. They break your heart if you have the opportunity to look at them, because they highlight what the children were exposed to during the time of that war. These children go on this journey over 6 weeks with Fekra of laughing, crying, creatively dealing with the situation and telling their story through this process. And the psychosocial impacts of this creative project is quite amazing, and the impacts that we hear from the parents, from the teachers, and from the children themselves really highlight the change that happens through that project. Now, what we did following this film was we identified organisations like FECRA. We found about 9 different organisations. FECRA was... Sorry, the reason why I brought up FECRA is because the director of FECRA said to me at the beginning, we would be doing this work with or without your money. We're inspired by this work and we're inspired for the change. And so it's sort of trying to find these diamonds in the rough. And so we worked with these 9 different organisations. We brought them together, had a workshop with them, and the workshop was basically, you tell us what your organisation does and why you do it, and the inspiration behind it, and tell us, but also tell these other 8 organisations in the room, and we'll see what we can come up with after that. The workshop was amazing. There were 9 different organisations that do amazing work in Gaza that had never ever really spoken to each other. They'd never really told each other what they do and what they, what their movement or their mission is in working in Gaza. By the end of this day, one disability organisation, together with FECRA, had come up with a project idea where you've got disabled children and they can't really fully participate in a program like this. If you're blind, then you obviously have difficulty drawing the drawings. If you're deaf, you have difficulty doing the sound effects. By the end of the day, they'd organised a project between FECRA and the disability organisation where blind children would do the drawings, deaf children would do the sound effects, and you'd bring these children together and have this beautiful creative process which would enrich both of their lives and sort of minimise the effects of their disability. So these sorts of ideas were coming up through this process, and what was interesting about the process as well is we'd said from day one, we don't have funding for this program. All we want to do is develop a concept note, and then we'll try and market your ideas, market your organisations to donors, and we'll see where that goes. Generally speaking, the local organisations won't move forward on a project like that because there's no firm commitment of money from the international organisation. It was a unique process that's still ongoing at the moment, and the organisations are working overtime to get these concept notes and these proposals written without any guarantee of funding, and it's simply happening because they're inspired by the work they're doing, because they can see the change, because they believe in the work they're doing, and it's based on their analysis, their needs, assessments, and so forth. And so this is as far as we. From our analysis, this is where we're taking a protection approach right from the program inception. There's a lot of discussion around trying to have protection integrated into the program cycle, but in actual fact, having protection integrated into the program cycle doesn't often happen. It's an add-on. It's something the international agency or the local agency will come up with an idea and then try and find funding for it. It's not something where the international agency takes a protection approach, i.e. takes participation, takes the relationship of communities and local organisations into the program design process. The project that we've come up with is called the Reaching Beyond the Wall project. It was an idea that the community groups agreed upon, and the idea is that you reach beyond the wall. I'm sure you're all aware there's been a blockade on Gaza for the last several years, and that wall isn't the only wall that exists in Gaza. We've all hear a lot about the issues in Gaza, So there's walls between men and women, there's walls between political parties, there's walls between children and adults, there's walls everywhere. It's a typical situation where you have a conflict, and from that conflict mushrooms other smaller and more pertinent conflicts. So this project's called Reaching Beyond the Wall, but it's also a metaphor for these organisations breaking down the walls that are growing up in the Gaza community. And from that sense, it is not just a humanitarian intervention where we're addressing the broad macro issues. It's a long-term rehabilitation, reconstruction intervention where we're working together with communities and community-based organisations on the issues that are most affecting them. A woman in Gaza who's locked in her house all day long doesn't necessarily know too much about what's going on between Israel and Palestine, but she does know about her personal circumstances, and so working with these organisations to address some of those issues is more important for a lot of the communities. That's my presentation.